G'day everyone, welcome back to Free Kick, the official AFLW fantasy podcast. I'm your host Liam, and I'm joined by a familiar face and an almost forgotten face on Free Kick this week for the end of the double game rounds. Will, welcome back. How have you enjoyed not stressing about the timetable of double game weeks? That was perfectly timed for you.
Look, I mean, I still stressed about it because I was still trying to keep an eye on it while I was overseas, but we decided that it was probably not worth trying to go to the sports bar every single game. So my wife and I listened to a few games just on the radio on the app. But yeah, I'm not unhappy to have missed the shenanigans that was the double games, if I'm honest.
Yeah, look, it is definitely a relief that they are over. And by all reports that I'm reading in different media sources, they will never return.
Thank goodness.
So it is the return of Will and the departure of the double game weeks. Now, Mel, you come back to us not off some long break, but just off what should have been an entertaining weekend for you. What was your highlight?
Yeah, well, it definitely wasn't how I went in fantasy, but that's okay because it was Pride Week, and Pride Week is my favourite week of the round. The energy is just so great. I got to go to 3 games in person, and each of them just had their own kind of Pride celebration, high energy, everyone is in a good mood. Just absolutely loved it. Like, to get out, and beautiful weather for it too. Get out in the sun, celebrate some Pride, watch some AFLW. So I pretty much didn't check the fantasy scores during any of the games, really, just at the end, which was, I got to say, a great way to enjoy footy. And then I checked it, and I felt bad.
You were saving yourself from yourself.
No, good week.
It was an awesome weekend for footy. I made it to the jewel in the crown of Pride weekend, which was Essendon and the Western Bulldogs at Big Oval on Friday night. Yeah, it's actually gotten so much media about how incredible it was. It was such a spectacular, free-flowing effort that no one has had a word bad to say. Look, I won't delve into that because I will get frustrated. And funnily enough, it won't be frustration with how the Bombers played. It may have been some certain tactics employed by Tam Hyatt that I feel like I would like to see less of. One thing I would like to see more of is obviously the shipping report. Now, as we've done in previous weeks, we'll start with the lowest score of the week. And unfortunately, Mel, I'm going to have to go straight back to you. How did you go?
Well, Jono's not here to, I don't even know if I beat him or not. I'm assuming I didn't. But Jono's not here to defend himself, so we're going to...
I think Jono did score more than you. I think he scored 2,080 or something.
There's nothing in the report, so he scored
Therefore, he
zero.
got 0. Exactly.
So, Mel, you're actually the second worst this week.
Yep, exactly. So I got what, if we just take a minute to appreciate, is actually a very good score compared to last year and compared to non-double rounds. In 1904, we were like gawking at 19s at the start of the double rounds. But alas, that is not very good this week. It meant my rank fell to about 1,400-ish, which is not great. So I'm resetting my objective to end inside the top 1,000, which is kind of where it was to begin with. So that's about... I was about 725 before we went into this one big double round, and I've well and truly slipped from there. But that's okay. My good call, I mean, the perk of coming last is that I get to have my good call first, and it's got to be Noffy. 662 as a captain. We were talking about, like, what's Noffy going to do in her double game? Is she going to maybe slow down a bit? Take it easy. Lots of footy in a short period of time. Nah. PB for disposals. Just absolutely. Can you imagine if you didn't have Noffy? Like, before this round started, there was 65% that had her. And I was like, what are the other 35% doing? That only went up to 69. So only a few people brought her in. Sorry, I'm monologuing here about Noffy, but like, how can you not? Liam?
I love your monologues, Mel. It's why I'm back.
It's a good monologue to have about the greatest fantasy player of all time.
It's kind of crazy to say, considering that we've been saying this about Kiara Bowers for 3 years, and now we're just like, Turbo who?
Yeah, like my team is Bowers down to me.
Out you go.
It's going to have to be Noffy down to me next year, and I will happily bow down to Noffy because that was amazing. I love watching her. She's so good. So happy she's been in my team, and to chuck the C on her and just to watch her play. And then the bad call
was everything else.
There was some others.
Thinking I need a nice, cheap 300 grand defender to make my trades work. Who should I bring in that's playing their double week? I know, I'll bring in Amy Boylecar, who got a 9.
And didn't
No,
play
I
another
haven't
game.
even got to that part yet. She got a 9 as the lowest player,
Oh.
lowest scored player of that whole game. It was excruciating. I was like, is she on the bench? No, she's not on the bench. She's just not doing anything. And then she got dropped for the second game, so I just had a 9 on field in the midfield, which was disgusting. Like, that's really... I attribute my 7,000 rank loss just to Boyle Carr. And, you know, you can't get angry at a rookie. I'm sure she did her best, but what was I thinking? Anyway.
That's a good point.
There's real shades of my second double week trade of Alyssa Brooke, who scored a double week score of 16, and that is from
And played both games.
2 games.
Wow.
And I had to field that because Brenna Tarrant was rested that week. So I can kind of relate to you there, Mel.
I'll come join you down in the 2000s, and we can wallow on our...
I would love to be in the 2000s.
We'll get to Will's rank in a
Okay.
minute.
And my blindside was watching that game and Millie Radford, like I was not checking the fantasy scores. As I mentioned, I was just like, she's everywhere. And I work with her and I see her in the office and I'm like, how are you doing both? Both of these, working full-time and playing midfield at Essendon. And she was everywhere. It was just the Radford show. I absolutely loved watching that. And then to check the fantasy scores and see her just dominate that game, wow. That was a highlight.
An awesome performance from her, and very surprising given that she did it without any CBA. She just kind of fits seamlessly between that wing and half back.
I mean, the game was entirely played in the middle of the ground, so...
Really don't want to get started on that one. I'm already feeling myself...
Moving swiftly onwards from Essendon Bulldogs.
No, my only complaint was Mills Radford was cruelly denied one of the highest scorer of the day tiles from the official AFL fantasy Twitter and Instagram accounts.
They do that for every other
because
day.
Elizabeth Georgia-Stathis lost like 10 points and she'd been the highest scorer when the game had finished immediately. And then Mills Radford had got points added and Georgia had lost points. And so she was cruelly denied that opportunity. Now, moving on the topic of cruelly denied, Will, you've been cruelly denied a ranking inside the top 4,000 until this week. Please do tell us how you went.
Oh, yeah. My return basically coincides with me coming back up the rankings with a bullet. I scored a enormous 2,038 points this week, which, much to what Mel was saying before, sounds fantastic until you realise that basically you take away 662 of those points and that's the rest of your team. Which puts me, as Liam's mentioned, inside the top 4,000, 3,921. I'll be honest, I didn't have the best double week series of games. I'm going to blame being in another country and the unfortunate concussion of Bree Davey for that. But you know what? I'm back to roughly where I was before the double games, when that was just purely my own bad decisions making me do really badly. And you know what? I'm going to agree with Mel and aim for inside the top 1,000 as well, because why not?
Why not? I will say, Will, you did miss a whole bunch of carnage on the start of week 3 because it was your literal wedding. So
Yeah.
it's not... you had a bit of a blowout pre the beginning of the double game weeks.
Yeah. I was aware of that and I chose to blissfully ignore that.
That was a very good call. Now, that's a perfect segue. You've really set yourself up here. What was your good call for the week?
My good call was picking a favourite here at free kick,
Piggy.
which was Elise Parker. I needed a midfielder for the double round. Elise Parker was the best option I could find in terms of price and what I thought she'd put out. And she scored 190 for me, which was the fourth highest double round score. I'm pretty sure it was only 2 points off second, which was her midfield teammate, Beck Beeson. And then you've got, another 400 points plus to get towards what Ebony Marinoff did. But we've talked a bit about, captaincy options, and the Captain's Corner in previous seasons has been a fantastic segment. And this year it's kind of just been nothing. Yeah. I was pretty happy with Elise Parker, and she's a player that I'm currently okay with keeping in my midfield for now. My bad call was a good call until it wasn't, which was Maeve Chaplin. Now, Liam and Jono and I went to the GWS Melbourne game and watched Maeve Chaplin absolutely dominate. I'm sure this was talked about on the podcast last week, but she looked like a great option going into the double week, and now I've lost myself 127k. Even though I made that decision for the right reasons, it has the wonderful hindsight making it looking much, much worse.
Horrendous. Yes, it's always fun when you pick someone who's come off 3 straight 70s to score 2 scores in the 30s.
Yeah.
But we will talk about Maeve Chaplin later, though, because there's a discussion to be had about what's happened to her role.
Indeed. And if you take her double round score, she's basically just scored another 70. So she is very consistent. But yes, my blind side was actually a friend of the pod, Michaela Paunger, scoring a 61 against Adelaide, which I was quite surprised by. Scored a respectable 31 in the first of the double week, and given her price and everything, we're kind of like, a 31, I'll probably take that in a double week. But to score a pretty decent 92, I was pretty stoked with that, given I was fielding Paunger for the double week, and she might be staying on the field for a little longer after all, but that is also something we'll be talking about a bit later.
Some very good foreshadowing. Thank you for doing my job for me, Will.
You are welcome.
Just quickly, the next highest scoring team was the Tamara Smith of it all, the free kick team. It scored at 21-12, which means that it is...
to the Tamara Smith of it all.
That was dire. That was truly dire. She's now had 2 scores in the teens in 3 weeks, just quietly.
And the fact that we've gone Tamara Smith for it all next means we've got a very exciting new winner for our shipping report, new lead.
Yes, well, I was just going to say, it's the Tamara Smith team's at rank 365. I had a 2,228 this week, so that's a round rank of 401, which moves me up 211 spots to rank 370, which is an agonising 5 ranks and 4 total points behind the Tamara Smith of it all, which is very frustrating given I'm agonisingly close.
I still can't believe that team has outperformed all of us, considering everything that went into it.
Oh, it was chaos that went into it, but it wasn't a bad team, and it had the right midfielders, and I think I traded in made a quick trade, traded in Chelsea Randall 3 weeks ago, a month ago.
Yeah, because I think it was the thing that worked. Yeah,
I was just like, oh yeah, that trade, those numbers work. Just launch into it, and this was in a week where I think in week 4 I just didn't even captain a double game week player just because I didn't get to making the trades because of the first week of it. It's just it's one of those funny moments where you go, well, what could have been? The what could have been is literally just your own brain. Ridiculous. But I still had a pretty solid week. My good call was, it's a long-term good call. It's been sticking fat with Courtney Hodder. Was definitely a consideration for me. I had some cash left over from making some trades. Do I need to make an upgrade of Hodder or Tripodi in my forward line? And I said, even though Hodder really had to junk it up against Carlton last week, there's still a good scorer there. And then she kind of repaid the favour with a 70, which means her last 3 average is rank 3 for forwards at 71.7. So I'll give that my good call. Now, my bad call, I won't dwell on the Maeve Chaplin because I made the same choice. that was just very unfortunate. But what I did actually say is my bad call is that I ended up not trading out Ariana Hetherington. Because of E.K. Smith being out, I had the ability to loop, kind of get a look at what Zali Friswell might do in a tough matchup against Richmond, and then decide if I want to put Ariana Hetherington on field. And Zali Friswell only put up a 73, and I went, yep, I'll chance my arm on that. Ariana Hetherington comes into the fourth quarter on 40, and she started the game on fire. She was a leading scorer on the ground after 10 minutes.
Oh, no. I know where this is going.
Last quarter, 1 free against. -3, ends on 37. So it's obviously not outrageous in the context of my team. I lost 6 points, but bloody hell, they were frustrating.
Still
6
not
points
ideal.
to lose.
No, you never like your players to go backwards in the last quarter.
No, it's depressing. Start on -3 and then improve, and I can be happy for you. That was my bad call. I just tried to chance my arm on the Goderington again, and it didn't pay off for me. And then my blind side, I'll talk a little bit about Charlie Rowbottom's forward time later, but it was actually Laura Gardner being named out on Wednesday afternoon. So kind of after we'd made our first set of trades, and then also after the release of the injury report. It was a quite literal blindside because we had no expectation that Gardner had been injured, had no mention of her name on the injury report. It's a little frustrating and disappointing. Sydney is unlike other teams where if you do know a player has some kind of, they are in discomfort, we are sending them off for a scan, we have not got the results yet, they would mention that in the injury report. It'll quite often be a TBC or a test. Sydney decided against it. So trades were made on the basis she'd be playing. Those trade plans had to change. So a complete blindside, and one that left me a little frustrated with Sydney's injury reporting. But we will digress from that to the watch and wait scoreboard. Now I can finally throw to Will to launch into it.
That's me. Yes, so the watch and wait scoreboard. I'm very glad to be back with the watch and wait scoreboard. It's one of my faves. So the top coach, Kiwi 5, Brett W., who has scored 12,208 points and an extraordinary 2,331 points for the week. They are 66 points of Carl W.'s Supreme team, which is pretty impressive. And third is a fair way behind that with 191 points less. So even though there's a bit of a concentration of coaches between third and eighth who are still sort of in that running, those top two have got themselves a nice little buffer, which is pretty good. Mm-hmm. Now, the top scorer this week is actually bananas. Even with the 662 points, you'd assume that this person's got with Noffy.
I don't think you could score it. Possibly, the maths does not work if you chose anyone else.
Sometimes Good, and Simon, the coach of Sometimes Good, 2,806 points.
Stupid.
So the rest
Ridiculous.
of their team has still managed to score over 2,000 without the Noffy captaincy, which is an incredible effort. Whether that's built this team for this round specifically or not, hard to say.
I suspect so.
I don't think it's hard to say. It's very easy to say, having looked at it.
But regardless, that score is just ludicrous. So well done to Simon. The top 100 marker is 11,550 points, and the Promo Donners is currently sitting just inside that top 100. And the score to stay inside that top 100 was 2,202 points.
2,202.
Very Richie Bow. So you're needing big scores in those rounds to stay up, as we knew would probably be the case. But yeah, so many scores in the 2000s, absolutely wild. In terms of the free kick league update, this is the first time in a long time that we've got 40 of the top 100 coaches in the league, and we have Kiwi 5 sitting at the top, which is most impressive. Mel.
Good to see that the top scorer is in our league as well. But I've got to say, we haven't been able to give an update on this for the last 3 weeks. So while I am super stoked to see that it's 40, because I feel like it's been sitting at 30, 33 for the last season and a half, nice to actually be able to get an update. I'll take 40.
Well, I would like to think that it's my return that has allowed that to happen.
Yes. Single-handedly. Manipulated time and space such that it can be ready in time. Thank you, Will.
Congratulations, Will. So, great to finally get an actual full watch and wait scoreboard update. We love it.
And
and
great to have someone here to present it that actually wants to. Jono always looks so sad. Okay, hot topics.
This week is all about the Sweet 16, our top choices for each of the lines. And the way we're going to structure the episode, we're going to break it up into each of the different positions, with the idea being Will, on his return, is coming with the hot news of who is his predictions for the best players for the rest of the season. We'll talk about some of the ones that are unlucky to miss. And then we'll get out the monoculars and have a look at some of those players that aren't in there and assess how far away we reckon they are, and then kind of maybe discuss if they need to be traded out, because there's quite a few highly owned players that are not going to be inside Will's Sweet 16. So, without further ado, Will, give us your defenders.
Yeah, the defenders is probably the most interesting line because there's quite a few players that could be in this top 5, and obviously we'll talk about a few that will be unlucky to miss this top 5 that are very, very good options regardless. But looking at the top 5, number 1 option is Maddie Newman from Adelaide, currently averaging 77.4. And quite simply, she just keeps getting it done. She wins the ball. She plays up the ground a lot. She's playing sort of as that proto-midfielder half-back, a lot of midfield time. Pretty good fixture other than that North game, and has been pretty much the highest averaging defender all year.
Yeah, I think the thing is she's basically just a winger at this point, but I've said it on a couple of podcasts now. Her role is as good as you can have in football. If you're not an inside midfielder, she basically has carte blanche access to wherever she wants on the field. Kind of gets deep inside both pockets. I think she's an excellent choice for number 1.
Yeah, and number 2 was the player that we all expected to be up there, probably is the number 1. Hasn't quite reached those heights yet, but is still scoring very, very well. Friend of the pod, Eilish Sheeran, averaging 74. Had a bit of a slow start thanks to that injury, but is really rolling now. 4 consecutive scores, over 70. You'd have to think that she's probably going to be in the conversation to possibly pass Maddie Newman, depending on how the rest of the season goes. But those two, I reckon, are clearly the top 2 at the moment.
Yeah, and has good matchups. Kind of, I think she'll excel against Melbourne and Hawthorn, who both are going to create contest and give Eilish the spaces she needs for scoring. I was just going to say, she was cruelly robbed of the dumbest 10 points on the weekend, or 8 points, because I literally think the umpire gave the free kick to the wrong team. Like, she got a hole in the ball free kick, perfect tackle, no dumping, no extra holding, literally perfection inside D50, and then would have had a shot at goal. Sorry, it was in her forward 50, and a spot where I think Eilish might be one of 3 people at Richmond who are capable of kicking it that long. Would have been perfectly within her right to kick with the breeze. No.
I think everyone was surprised by that.
Cool. So her average should be even higher, and particularly for her last 3-game average. I think she would be almost at number 1, or close, almost at number 1 at that point.
Yeah, kicked a ripping goal too. I think the one thing that, while it's great watching for the fans, isn't as great for the coaches, is she just needs to stop trying to take on every single tackle, because she's still giving away at least 6 points a game in holding the balls.
I really like about Eilish that she's back to playing more consistent game time. I was a bit worried when I brought her in super early week 3 and it was only 61 and then went down, but she's back up to that like 70s or so, which is good confidence for her fitness and her longevity in the rest of the game. And good to see that she's getting on the scoreboard to make up for her excessive amount of free kicks that she gives away.
Yes.
Absolutely loves it.
I'd love to see a game without a free kick. That would just be beautiful.
I think you may as well ask for 1,000 points. Will, who have you got at number 3?
a favourite of mine, Becky Webster, another player that we've always said was going to be a really good scoring defender and has proven as such. Currently the second highest averaging defender in the competition, 74.8. Saw some midfield minutes on the weekend against Richmond in the absence of Amy McDonald, but to be completely honest, with Becky Webster, Geelong wants the ball in her hands. She's a great long kick. So the role doesn't necessarily, change how I feel about Becky Webster. Obviously, being in the midfield is good, but I think she'll score pretty good regardless. The only caveat with Becky Webster is Geelong have a pretty tough fixture. They finish with Brisbane, West Coast away, and then Adelaide, which is just about as hard as you can get.
Yeah, I think we'll be discussing Beck Webster's position when we talk about some of the players that are unlucky to miss. To go from someone who's got a really brutal run to someone who's extremely consistent and has a pretty solid one, who have you got at 4?
Yeah, number 4, I got Charlie Thomas. A few people were a bit worried about her after a slow start, which seems to be a bit of a trend for the defenders, but she's really hitting her straps now. 2 consecutive 80s, only really been below 60 that once, and is just super reliable. Started the year as the most expensive defender and has been in my team the whole time and has probably been in a lot of teams the whole time simply because she is that reliable.
I don't know if the uber ceiling is going to be there. I think Charlie Thomas had a 90 and 106, 107 last season.
Yeah.
And it's for something that I talked about way back when we did our preseason show. The marks just aren't there for her this year. A lot of intercept possessions, incredibly good defender, but the way that West Coast are playing is different. So I think that she's definitely made strides as a footballer, but she's come back a little bit as a fantasy scorer. But that being said, I think that with the way in which she's going to play for these last 3 games, I don't expect it to change a whole lot. And I expect probably 3 scores between about 68 and 78 or maybe 80 for the last 3 weeks.
I kind of feel the same based on her last couple of runs, but even if she does that and it feels like it's not her full potential, her season 7 potential, that still puts her where she is now
definitely.
Or higher. So I think she's one that you can still, if you don't have her, you can still be shooting for her for a final run to the season. And I don't have her, but I'm particularly excited by the fact that she hasn't gained a huge amount of money and we've been able to try and test her with the new Eagles team that's doing a lot better than expected. I think she's a good shout.
I think it's just going to be if you don't have her, and I don't have her at the moment, she's extremely highly owned. What am I catching up with to those teams above me? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But we won't go into all of those tactics right now. That's also a conversation for the next couple of weeks. Who have you got at 5, Will?
Yeah, number 5, I've got one of my favourites actually, who was a player I had last year, which is Dizzy Darcy. Gold Coast Suns, taken to a midfield role with aplomb, has scored 5 consecutive 70-plus scores to get her to an average of 73.8. Been a really good year for Dizzy in what has really been a pretty disappointing one for the Suns, but I think the one drawback to Daisy Darcy is that they do finish with a final round game against North at Arden Street, which could be brutal.
Yeah, I actually think that it will very much come down to what role Dizzy is playing, because Dizzy had, an 84 on the weekend in the objectively hardest matchup for any position that isn't a ruck on defence versus position. Thanks, Jaden, for the stats. I think if she holds the midfield role, she will be up there possibly at 1 or 2. The big question is just going to be how much of a midfield role does she keep when Claudia Whitford comes back. So I think it's right to not have her up so high at the moment. We just don't know. She had 77% CBAs on the weekend. She's definitely someone that if you don't have her, I'd be targeting her just generally. I think she's got more than enough capability to hit that. What are we saying? The mark for top 5 this year is probably going to be about 71, 72 average to be there or thereabouts. I think she can comfortably hit that for the rest of the season. It's just going to be how high up a priority is she to get in.
What I do quite like is that in the start of round 6, she got an 81 with 10 kick-ins, but then she also got an 84 last week with
none.
So I'm seeing that if she's in that midfield role, then great. If she's not and she's in defence, and North, I don't know, pretty steady, but we've seen quite a few high point games recently. If she can hold that kick in roll and just keep kicking those out, that's a great way to accumulate points for her. So I think she's good whichever way she plays. It would be she'd be in the unlucky to miss if something swapped over with the averages, but I think she's strong 5 or maybe just outside the top 5.
Yeah, and to me, as I said, the only reason I didn't have her higher is because there's a chance that Gold Coast don't actually touch the ball against North other than kick-ins. So,
in which case, give her more to
We'll see how that goes, but yeah, I think she's a really solid option.
Yeah. Now, with that's great top 5. On those that are lucky to miss, Mel, who's your, unlucky candidate?
Yeah, I feel like at this time last season, there was people sneaking up on us like an Ange Stannett that we weren't expecting to be so close to the top. And for me, that's my sneaky snake position. I give it this year to Maddie Gay, who is in the average points, for all defenders. She's currently sitting 5th. She's someone that we were really keen on at the start of last season, but then haven't really spoken about as much this season in comparison to like the other 5 defenders that we just named. Other than like a low game at the start with a 51 against Freo, she's been pretty consistent in the like 70s to low 80s with a good ceiling shown of 96. I think she's actually someone we've slept on a little bit here. I reckon she could be someone that if she has a couple of good games, maybe bumps out Daisy Darcy for that 5th spot.
Yeah, I think Maddie Gay is someone that I think you could comfortably have high. I would not be shocked if she's top 5. I think the one that we're really sleeping on, though, this is the Ange Stannett, and that's Gabby Newton.
I like the correlation with the team.
Exactly. It really has kind of continued just to creep up with her scoring. So she has had her last 2 scores have been 88, has had 1 score below 77 in her last 5, including a high of 90. But I think the thing that we're probably missing out on here is that Fremantle's run to end the season for midfielders is really, really good. They end the season with the Western Bulldogs. They've got GWS and West Coast. I think that if you're looking for someone who is lowly owned inside the top 1,000, I think Gabby Newton is absolutely the play. And to be honest, the player that I would probably be shunting out is Beck Webster, because that run is dire, like Brisbane and then Adelaide. And then West Coast too, for defenders, are not always a great matchup and can actually be quite difficult. I think that's a little bit that might push her out. I'm not saying she's going to be bad and going to be dreadful.
Yeah.
I just think Gabby Newton is the rocket that comes from outside of it to possibly be, top 1 or 2 for last 3 game average.
Yeah, and to me, the only saving grace for Beck Webster is that time in the midfield in McDonald's absence that could keep her scoring that highly. But I completely agree with both Maddie Gay and Gab Newton. They were 2 players that when I was making this 5, I was like, oh, I want to squeeze them in there. But yeah, I think any of those options, I think there's not going to be a huge amount of spread between probably those bottom 5. I think Sheeran and Newman are probably quite easily the top 2. And then beyond that, you could quite happily have any of the rest.
Yeah, that's a good call. Now, we've done the unlucky to miss. I've called this section in the binoculars because we're going to have to whip out the binoculars and look behind us and see where some of the highly owned options are and if we think they're priority trades because they're not going to get close. Mel, I'm going to throw to you first. Ruby Slicer, how closely do you think that she can get to the top 5 and is she a trade out as a result?
Yeah, I think she's a trade out. I think she's a goner, which is quite sad because we were really excited for her at the start of the season. And even though we have seen a bit of midfield time come recently, I think her total average is too far behind. And in terms of, we haven't really just seen anything that's giving us a good spark. Even when she was in the midfield, like the role has been changed, but none of them have been electric. And I just think she's falling factor to Collingwood having a pretty average season. So I don't think she's one. If you've got her, she's already lost a lot of money, so it's not as if you're going to do yourself any harm by holding on to her any longer. But yeah, she's a trade for me. What about you, Liam, with some... Oh.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the only thing that I looked up last week, because I traded out Ruby for Maeve Chaplin, which was a mistake. I looked up her averages when she's had CBAs in games, and I think it's only like 65, which kind of seems a bit odd, but I think the most marks she's ever taken when she's played midfield is 2. So that gives you some indication, not that much ceiling. So you'll look at the midfielders run and say, oh, that looks great. Just ceiling's a bit capped. I just don't know if she's going to get close to that 70. I think she's probably going to be mid-60s. I think there's probably some discussion to be had about Sinead Goldrick, someone we've not discussed, coming off a really bad score. If you're looking for a way to make yourself a bit of a pod, I think we need to watch this week to see how she goes another week with a fully healthy midfield at Melbourne. But I think she could start to drop scoring. She's lost that midfield time. And there's a lot more accumulators at Melbourne. And speaking of Melbourne, I'm just going to throw to Maeve Chaplin, but Will, apparently you want to interject my perfectly timed rant. Outrageous.
For sure, but just quickly on Sinead Goldrick, she's worth 870,000, and she's scored some pretty good scores. Scored that 100 against Freo in week 4, but I think now's a great time to do a sideways trade anyway. She's basically the same price as a lot of those top 5 players. I think if you've got the luxury to do that, it's a great option.
Particularly if you're in those higher ranks. I don't know if it's this week. It may be a next week thing. No, the one I wanted to talk about was Maeve Chaplin. Just wanted to say that she probably is a trade that you need to make. I think there's been some shifts in roles, and she was clearly under the weather in the second game against St Kilda, has lost a stack of cash. Just very disappointing. I just think that she's been playing as that deepest or second deepest defender, and it's actually been Denby Taylor who's the one who's getting higher up the ground. So as much as I traded her in for those 70s and I got 30s instead, I'm going to be looking...
You got a 70 again.
Well, go away. That's rude. I know it's rude to you as well, but it's just too harsh.
As someone that has traded in Maeve Chaplin for a role, got very excited, and then traded her out. I feel like there's a lot of chopping and changing. There's a lot of fantasy potential at Melbourne, but there's also a lot of highs and lows. And I wouldn't be counting on anything staying for too long. So, yeah. I agree that capitalise on the money you've made.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation that they're now healthy and better, so the ball is back there less. And it didn't help against St Kilda. There was literally 0 kick-ins. All righty then now. We've taken a bit of time on the defenders. Will, I'm going to have to ask you to be pretty rapido on the midfielders. Give us your top 5. I feel like I can guess probably the first 3.
Yep, so number 1 is Charlie Rowbottom. No, Ebony Marinoff. She's averaging 152. I've literally written in our reason, actually insane. It's wild.
Facts.
Plays Collingwood Geelong, so should score well. And yes, there's a North matchup in there, but it's Noffy. Doesn't matter. Number 2, I've got Jazz Garner. She's hitting some form now and hitting some of the big scores, which is good. Averaging 111.8, but I think she's a really good chance to finish the season, probably second highest average. Third, I've got Ash Riddell, second highest averaging player at the moment on 114.8. Started the year on fire, but there is a slight amount of concern because she's scored 3 consecutive scores in the 90s.
Yes.
But does finish with a pretty easy game against the Gold Coast. So hopefully you're not too worried about Ash Riddell.
I feel like this is the ships passing back in the night. Like it was Garner season last season, and in this season we're like, oh, Riddell, look at her out ahead. Her average is still 3 points higher. But now we're starting to see Riddell getting a bit tired, Garner stepping back in to do kind of what she has in the past. As devastating as it is, I was super excited that we might get a specky Riddell above Garner at the end of the season, but seems like we're reverting to the mean a little bit here.
Yeah, and I think we should pull one out for Tanya Kennedy, who had the unenviable job of trying to tag Jazz Garner and just got taken to the cleaners. Like, just the number of times she just got stuck at a stoppage going like, oh, who do I go to? Oh, I can see Mia King's ahead, but I Jazz, oh no, and then Jazz is gone. It was brutal to watch.
Yeah, it's arguably the least enviable role in football. That unless your name's Kathy Svark or Brie Conan, very few people have managed to do it well.
Number 4.
So Number 4, I've put Ali Anderson. Her average is greatly boosted by her early season 161, but she remains a strong scorer and a consistent scorer and has a pretty decent run to finish the year. Geelong, Sydney and St Kilda, so I'd expect her to at least stay at that 106 average that she's got. And at number 5, I've kept Charlie Rowbottom in there. Prior to the last 2 weeks, she probably would have been 4th, if not
Third
even
or
3rd.
second.
Was on an absolute tear, but since Claudia Whitford's concussion, she's scored 2 consecutive 70s. Liam mentioned a bit earlier, she's looked a bit tired. She's had a lot of work to do, played a bit of time forward, could be carrying an injury. Firstly, she'll be definitely hoping for her midfield partner, Claudia Whitford's return, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting watch for the end of the year, and finishes the year against North Melbourne in that game that we've mentioned could be pretty brutal.
Yeah, I think you'd only really trade her out if you're upgrading to one of the ones above her, because I still think she's going to be good. But, this is the first season that we've really seen her have a couple of tackles where she hasn't been able to shrug them off, kind of look a little bit slower, a little bit more worn out, which is very surprising for Charlie Rowbottom because she's normally an absolute tank. So, yeah, I hope that she's just kind of pretty exhausted having a lot of the midfield to herself, especially after Ali Drennan in the off-season as well, so they've lost a bit more power there. It's kind of all relying on her shoulders at the moment, and it's wearing her down a bit. But I'm hopeful that this is a temporary bad fixture situation and that she comes back super strong next season.
Yeah, I'd be a little bit concerned. She's probably going to tank her cash again this week. She lost a bunch last week, going up against Sydney, so probably sees Tanya Kennedy with the tag. I think it could be another really bad score. I just don't think it's my number one priority in my squad. But if you don't have Garner, I think now's the week to go and get her from Charlie Rowbottom. And I think that's a very enviable play. Now, in terms of the unlucky to miss, I think I'm going to lead with mine on this one. Mon Conti has been snubbed, seriously snubbed. Because she is extremely high at the moment on the last 3 averages. She is currently 3rd with 114. Will, why do you hate Mon Conti?
I actually love Mon Conti, and Mon Conti is in my team. I was going to put Mon Conti in at number 5, but I thought, you know what, I can't rule out Charlie Rowbottom just yet.
I think I think
it's just about there. You're just about convinced me.
I just think it's the thing that tips me over is the Tanya Kennedy tag this week. And then the possibility that she sees Maria Maloney trying to be a pest against Port Adelaide. I just think there's a few too many factors that say that she's probably just a 90 to 100, like high 90s, low 100s player for the rest of the season. Whereas I think Moncon going up against Melbourne, who can easily be scored against, it's been a bit difficult to tell with all their players back. And then I think also Essendon is a team that, I still think she can be up there with the top 5 for the rest of the season. I think the one that I really love is I think she could score massive against Melbourne this week. Yeah, now, Mel, what in a shock twist, I'm looking at the show notes, we've got a Fremantle player as you're unlucky to miss.
I mean...
Dana East.
No, it's Ash McCarthy. Just throwing back to the... I tried to put her into the Tamara Smith of it all, got rejected. Going to try put her into the top 5. I think that she's shown that she's got the ceiling. She's shown she's got some really good scores. I unfortunately missed watching the game on the weekend for Freo, but little bit of a lower score there, but also within her range. I think she's just someone that's got some pretty consistently high scores there. She's really coming into her own. She's got a lot of space to dominate at Freo because it's really her and Strom. And I mean, Strom's got the ruck position on her, so makes that one a little bit harder to aim for there. But yeah, I think she's a really good option. I don't know if she's going to necessarily go up too much from here, but I think she's just unlucky to miss out on those top. I also wouldn't see her taking that Charlie Rowbottom spot if we're tossing up who goes in there. I think she's a solid 5 to 10, but she's a good choice.
Easily match. I think she could match Rowbottom just because of the run that she has got. West Coast.
She could match Rowbottom, but if Rowbottom's scoring 70s, that's not a big...
Rowbottom's just matchups just are not ideal either. And it'd be one that I'd be more actively considering trading out if I didn't have a host of other issues.
And I'll agree with you there quickly, because I will say that an early iteration of my trades for this week did include trading out Charlie Romano.
Well, that's something for later on. Just having a quick look in the binoculars. Just in terms of players that have been hot in teams from the week 7 and week 6 double game weeks, Mel, Tiana Smith, is she someone you can hold in your side, even though she's not in the top 5?
I think so. And I'm not sure if she's so much as a hold, because she's only like 4.7% owned. I think she's a good one to trade in at that price. If you're looking for someone to replace your M5, an upgrade on your M5 if you've still got a rookie or whatnot on field. She's shown she's got a pretty good ceiling. She's able to hit it a couple times. She's got a few fluctuations there, but she went really big against a tough matchup in Adelaide. She absolutely loves a tackle. I think like even just watching on the weekend, she's a really core part of like St Kilda's midfield play. So she's getting the ball a lot. I think that she could be a solid option to keep.
Yeah, I think that's...
And she's quite highly... Sorry, one more point. She's moderately highly owned on field for the top 100 players, which I kind of like. It's that you can kind of match it while it's there. It's not too risky, but it's not like a must-have because you're missing out otherwise.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And she's still in the top 10 for last 3 average. The one player I wanted to talk about, another popular trade-in from last week, Zali Goldsworthy. Sadly, the late out of Tani Evans and also Izzy Huntington really tanked her ability to play high up the ground at all, and GWS just look lost. Georgia Garnett's being swung around. If you have the capacity to trade her out, I would. I think that she'll do better now that both of those players are in. We saw many more times against Adelaide where she was far higher up the ground, even managed to kick a few goals, but I think that you'll be happy if she averages 90 for the last 3 games of the season, which I still think is probably 13 to 14 points below top 5. So I'd be looking for an exit strategy if I could.
Simply put, she's just playing far too much time as a deep forward for my liking, and GWS just aren't getting the ball in anywhere near enough for that to be a good role.
And they're not accurate even when she plays up the ground. She has to work so hard just to get 2 hands on a dump kick out of D50 as the outlet. Like, GWS are not a good team at the moment. They look lost a lot of the time. Zali's not benefiting from that. All right. The other player that I wanted to mention, just Maddie Prespakis, I think she's someone who is also popular. I'd be looking to trade her out if I can. I just don't think she's going to get there. I feel like 90s for the rest of the year, and you'd be thinking that you've been pretty bang on with her averages. Mel, final one.
I feel like Prespakis has probably been 90 average the whole time. I'm not really sure she was ever a contender for the top 5 in my mind.
She was just a target for teams into the double game weeks because she was affordable.
I see. Well, I think also it's pretty obvious by now, I imagine, for most coaches, but Goody has topped out. She's someone we were very excited for at the start, thinking she could do that whole transition from absolute rookie to superstar. And she did. She got quite far. I think a lot of us thought she would go a bit further, but she's confirmed that she's not going to end in the top 5, but definitely someone that's got the potential to be up here in the next couple of seasons. So she's a good one to cash out on, but yeah, not very far away, very small when we look in the binoculars.
Agreed wholeheartedly. Moving across to the rucks, Will, I'm actually doing this section. Mim Strom. All right, next section. Let's go on to the forwards.
No.
So, the forwards.
No, I won't take you
too
full.
excited. Matilda Schultz.
Simply put, Mim Strom is currently 20 points above the next best ruck. So, that's a clear, obvious one. Got a couple more to talk about. Lucy Wales. We knew she'd come good. Unfortunately, Jono and I basically got the couple of weeks where she played poorly, traded her out, and then she proceeded to be the second best ruck for the rest of the season.
Classic.
Averaging 83.4, has a pretty good run to finish the year as well. GWS, Melbourne, and Richmond. Expect her to probably average around 90-ish, I would say, for the rest of the year. For the third person I've put, I originally had the second Wales, Steph Killer Wales, but I have changed my mind and gone for this week's Rising Star nominee and also Mark of the Year winner.
Presumptive.
Presumptive, but I think I will be right. Matilda Scholes, who, despite her current average of being just 69.8, so a good 30 points below Mimstrom, she's finishing like a rocket. She's got a last four average of 86.5. Steph Wales has been remarkably consistent, but I'm not sure she's got the same ceiling as her sister Lucy at this stage, and has a tougher fixture, I'll say, than Matilda Scholes.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we've seen from Scholes is, even though Levicki has been flipping in and out of the team, her time on ground is up massively, and also I doubt she sees that much time away from ruck stoppages ever again, because in light of the fact that I just don't think that Port Adelaide have a lot of speed out of stoppage, that's made up for Matilda Scholes just being surprisingly quick over the first 5 metres.
Brute forcing it out and being
and
agile.
just being surprisingly agile over 5 metres and just hoofing it. And, they do have already Abby Dowrick, but I just think that what we've seen over the last 3 weeks from Matilda Scholes would have been a lovely player to get, but for the double game weeks I was shunted, and injuries. Mel, you had her for her double game week for some mega score, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And then I thought I would continue. I was like, I don't normally do that many ruck trades. I'll continue this ruck new flavour every week and trade her out. That was a mistake. But the double game weeks were good that they allowed Schultz to be an option and get her back on the discussion board, because I think she's one that you could pick up now while she's a little bit cheaper and ride to the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think if you can't afford a ruck over $1 million, I'm going Matilda Scholes every day of the week. In terms of the unlucky to miss, the one that I've got my eyes on, if I were to be making a below 900k upgrade in the ruck line, it's Poppy Kelly. She has a great run of matchups, has Melbourne, Essendon and Hawthorn. She's also been, outside of, honestly, the only reason we've not talked about her more is that the fact she missed those couple of weeks. So she's had a last 3 average of 77.7, has had a 95 up against Geelong, also had an 86 up against Sydney earlier in the year. So feasts against the less than spectacular teams and finishes the season with Melbourne, Essendon, who just have a lot of stoppages, so a lot of points, and then Hawthorn are the same thing.
Yeah, and she's basically this season's Sabrina Frederick, where we've got a player who's come in, wasn't expected to be the number one ruck, and due to injuries to other players has taken the number one ruck role and done really, really well. So,
which is
well done to Poppy Kelly.
Very surprising, because we've seen her in the ruck previously.
And she's been awful. Yeah, I also think she was a lot. She has clearly, upped her endurance. I'd say her time on ground has been up a lot. She's also not now competing with anyone really, because Gabby Seymour is a full-time defender. She's been an absolute fantasy jet so far this season. Just in terms of the one player we need to talk about, do we trade them out? And it's the most highly owned ruck inside the top 100, the top 1,000, basically everywhere, and that's Ailish O'Dowd. She is the queen of the last quarter 30 points to get to a mid to high 60s score.
Every single
For the
week.
rest of the season, what do we think she averages, and is she a must-trade this week?
I'm going to say she's probably going to average a low to mid 60 for the rest of the year.
Oh, that's really bold of you, Will.
Wow, you've really gone out on a limb.
I have, much like the very long limbs of Irish O'Dowd. Simply put, I think that if you need to fix up elsewhere, I don't think it's a priority. But if you are at the stage where you are shuffling around players, yes, she's a priority, if that makes any sense.
Because 100% agreed.
Because if you can get up even to it, if you can go sideways to a Schultz, if you can get her to Mimstrom, congratulations, you're doing fantastic.
Wow.
But yeah, if you've basically got the rest of your team fairly well set, if you've got maybe 3 or 4 out of the ones we're saying are going to be top 5 players on your other lines and a couple of other players that you're pretty certain are going to put up a good score, then yes, I'd be getting rid of Eilish O'Dowd. If your team's like mine, where it's basically got more holes than a piece of Swiss cheese, Eilish O'Dowd is a fantastic on-field ruck.
I would be watching for Fleur Davis's position in the team. She had 27% game time on the weekend. If she is dropped, I actually think Eilish O'Dowd becomes a more comfortable hold for the rest of the year. I think the fact that she scores spectacularly in final quarters speaks to the fact that she does actually have incredible endurance, and she's being held back by lower time on ground than you would otherwise like to see. In some quarters, over the double game weeks, had 2 breaks, which was very, very frustrating to see. Speaking of frustrating, the hardest line to pick of the year, all year, has been the forwards. Will, I ask of you, who are your top 5?
Yeah, this was a tough one because I think there's 3 that I think are pretty obvious, and then you could throw a blanket over the rest of what could happen for the rest of the year. So, number 1, I've got Kate Hoare, 83.4 average, consistent as ever, great final round matchup against Collingwood, so you'd expect her to be, up there as usual. Number 2, I've got Chelsea Randall, who just refuses to go away as a great fantasy option, averaging 75, especially thanks to some really good scores in the last couple of weeks. Also has a pretty good run to finish the year. And I've got Alice O'Loughlin, who proved that her early season form was no fluke and looks like she's going to be a long-term option for us in that forward line, consistently putting up scores of 50+ and usually going 60 to 70, and also has a really great game to finish against Gold Coast where she could kick 20 goals. So I think those 3 are pretty obvious. It was picking the next 2 that I struggled with, and the first one I went for was a friend of the pod, Caitlin Gould, averaging 65, so she's in that high bracket, consistently scoring between 60 and 80 most weeks. I'd be wary of a potentially lower score against North Melbourne in that second last week, but she could really cash in against Collingwood and Geelong.
The one thing I would say about Caitlin Gould, I also did some looking into this because I was thinking about upgrading forwards last week. Caitlin Gould has scored exactly 1 score over 80 playing as a full-time forward in the last 2 seasons, and that was against GWS. So that, and it took 3 goals to do it as well. I think the big risk this week is he actually plays up on Lucy Cronin, who has been doing a very good job at blanketing forwards. Gemma Houghton threatened to get off the chain, only scored 43, and it took a potential goal of the year snap from the ruck to be able to do it. I think if Lucy Cronin's the matchup, I'd actually be a little concerned about her ceiling. So there's some definite red flags there. Speaking of red flags, we've got, a bit of an inside bull at 5. Who is it?
Yeah, we talked about her a little bit earlier. Courtney Hodder, finally hitting the form that we really thought that she would. Last 3 average of 71.7, which I believe you said was the 3rd best over that period. But it kind of speaks to how tough picking forwards is, because on the other lines, a 71 is kind of like, oh yeah, that's all right. But yeah, her fixture isn't too bad, so could really jump into calculations. We know that she comes good at this time of the year. She loves when it comes into towards the finals. So I think she's as good an option as any. But yeah, there's a few other options you go for, but picking the forwards is tough.
It is very tough. In terms of the unlucky to miss Mel, do you have any that you feel particularly aggrieved that missed out?
Well, I'd like to say good run for Ruby Chipote. She was someone that we were very... I was particularly excited about at the start of the season, friend of the pod, and she has just outdone all expectations of her, above and beyond. She's fought her way into the side. She's got the game time. She's got the scoring. I'm okay with her not finishing top 5 because this has been a huge season for Ruby as terms of a breakout, but she was kind of looking like she could get there at one point. So she's kind of quietened down a little bit in the last few weeks with the 35 as well. And if Alice O'Loughlin is really roaring into it, maybe having already won forward from North Melbourne in your side is enough. But yeah, Ruby's put in a great effort.
Yeah, I think she was definitely one that I think can be putting up the 65 to 70 score, which gets you in a kind of rolling top, like last three rolling average top five. I wouldn't be shocked if she does it again. We know that she can score really highly. It might just be that she prefers in some instances those wetter conditions and gets more of the tackles. The player that I wanted to mention is Anya McDonough, fresh off 100, going up against GWS this week, could score even more. The only reason I think justifiably she's not in there is that Melbourne and Richmond are probably going to be far tougher matchups for her. I think that she probably gets Talia Gillard, who's a very, very good one-on-one defender, and then finishes the season with Richmond, who have been relatively good at restricting forward scoring, but didn't necessarily restrict someone that you also felt was aggrieved to be left off your own list.
Yeah, so the person I left off is Lingy Aisling Maloney from Geelong, and the reason of that is despite being in the top bracket at the moment for current average, averaging 65, Geelong's just got a shocker of a run to finish the year. Couldn't justify putting her in the top 5 with games against West Coast, Adelaide and Brisbane, but to be fair, she's getting a lot of the ball up the ground. They're using her as a link player, and is kicking goals as well. So she's had a fantastic season. Maloney will most likely be in the All-Australian squad. I think she's currently sitting third or something in the goal kicking overall as well, which is fantastic for a second season. She's been incredible, but I worry strongly about that finish to the year. And if you do have Maloney and you're one of the people that picked her and has been sitting pretty with her in your team since the beginning, now might be a good time to send her sideways to someone like a Chelsea Randall.
Yeah, particularly sitting at 860k, you don't even have to spend 100k to get her up to Randall. Another player that I could also just mention, who could also have a stack this year, and actually may have had the highest score for any forward, second highest score for any forward, and that's Greta Bodie. Also has decent enough run for Hawthorn, had 123 with 6 against St Kilda, going up against GWS, who really do struggle with the forward that can get higher up the ground. We saw good scores from Taylor Levy, Tia Charlton, and Danielle Ponta, etc. on the weekend. I think she could be one that benefits. Now, in terms of having a look in the binoculars, how far back are they? I think we already alluded to it. Michaela Paunger. I watched this game and came away impressed with her effort against Adelaide. Her tackling was good. I was extremely impressed with her ability to get the ball at stoppage going the wrong way and manage to find hands outside, get width, probably better than anyone else outside of Elise Parker. I actually think she probably looked at second best as a pure midfielder at stoppage multiple times against Adelaide. I just think the big issue is the role, because if she's playing mostly half forward, she's probably a 40. If she's playing more midfield, I think she's a 55-60, which puts her within spitting distance of top 5. Who here feels confidently on her role?
I don't think you could say confidently, but it's the role that we
envisaged,
were hopeful for at the start of the year. It's what we wanted, and I think it's worth holding another week if you've got other areas, because she's got money to make now. She's just gone up in price. Break even super low. All she needs to do is put up a 50 again, and you're laughing basically. So I think that it's worth maybe holding another week if you've got, say Azali Friswell, who's someone we've talked about who's started to struggle a bit.
That was going to be the next player to talk about.
There you go. Azali Friswell, not quite getting as much of it on the wing. I think possibly some teams are putting a bit more effort into stopping that outside run for Geelong, but simply put, Geelong hasn't had the best season, so she might be a player to move on. I think she's probably more a priority, because I think you'll probably get similar scores out of Friswell and Paunger.
Yeah, I think it's also the run. Like we've talked about, they've got Brisbane this week. I think that could be brutal. Now, Mel, what are your thoughts on Gabby O'Sullivan?
Yeah.
She's someone who we know can score at a premium level for a forward. Put up some lower ones recently. Is she close enough to the top 5 to keep for much longer?
Yeah, well, speaking of similar scores, if Pounger's getting a similar score to Friswell for 2/3 of the price. And we've got Gabby O'Sullivan, who came away with a 39, priced about 800k last week. So that was pretty annoying. Again, unfortunately, didn't get to watch that game, but seeing the game before where she did her ankle and then just struggled through, I'm assuming that was still sore and really limiting her ability to move around. It looks like she was crazy to continue playing through that ankle injury the week before, to be honest. So wouldn't be surprised if there's some residual pain there. I think, unfortunately, it means that she's not one to keep. I do like the idea of a matchup against West Coast this week, and I don't think she's the biggest priority to trade out. I mean, overall, there will be worse, but with her price, she's well positioned to shuffle over to someone else, and she did just lose a good chunk of money, so she could be one to trade sideways before she continues to leak, if you've not got bigger issues.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that using the cash that you might otherwise spend to take Gabby-O up to a Chelsea Randall, I think you would be better placed trying to upgrade Ailish O'Dowd up to one of Poppy Kelly or Matilda Schultz. I think you're going to get a bigger price, get a bigger points game. I think Gabby-O has a good run. We just don't know about that ankle. She just meandered around a lot in that game against Carlton, and Carlton did a very good job at stopping Fremantle doing what they really wanted to do, and they had a fully healthy side back as well. So I'm agreeing with you there. She is definitely on the kind of second tier of trade-outs for these final 3 weeks. Now, one final player to discuss. She was a F1 in the preseason. She was F1 in our hearts and F1 in our teams because she cost a serious amount of bank. It's Bonnie Toogood, now sitting at
F1 in our trades as well.
something K. We're just not going to talk about week one, okay? We decided this. She's now played 2 games in a row, had a very quiet first one, looked a little bit more lively up against the Bulldogs. I'm just going to need to pull up her score. So had a 65 up against the Bulldogs. Now, she has North, then Richmond, and then Carlton. She's extremely cheap at the moment. Would you pick her up as a very cheap F5, or potentially even as a downgrade from, say, a Gabby O'Sullivan or a Zali, or it's basically a sideways from a Zali as well? Is she going to be close enough to top 5?
Well, I guess the other question is, what's her break even? Because is she going to be cheaper next week?
She's already lost 700 grand.
Yeah, she's already lost a fair bit.
I think it's high 40s. And again, thanks for Jaden Popowski's website on this one. He estimates that if she scores a 70 this week, she'd be at basically 700k. So she'd make 70k.
You'd only be trading her in because you think the scoring's there. She's not one you're going to trade in and then trade out again, because she's not going to be making you any money. And I just haven't seen enough that the scoring is there. It's kind of a post-injury kind of team's done really well without her for a few weeks now. It's not that Essendon don't need her as such, it's just that they've adapted to a world without her, and I just don't think she's as essential as she is before, because if she doesn't make you any points, she's definitely not making you any money. You're kind of stuck there. So I wouldn't be touching this. She's a little meerkat in my binoculars.
Put it this way, if she was coming into this game in a more favourable matchup, I might have said this is a fantastic chance. But they're coming up against North, and I can't see her.
Bad as you could get.
I can't see her scoring like more than maybe a 70 at best against North, and
70 is kind of top 5.
True, but I think realistically, I can't. I'd struggle to see her scoring more than 60 this week. If she does, great. Jump on her next week. She'll go up in money, but she's still cheap.
Yeah, it's a real tough one for me. I can make good arguments both ways. She managed to score 65 against a team that was dropping 6 behind the ball, it felt like, for most of the game. There was no space inside 50.
They did a feature on it where there was 11 Bulldogs in defensive 50. There was literally 6 back.
It was stupid. She did particularly well considering, I think, the other potential benefit, and it was just talked about by Libby Birch on the commentary for her, the first game back that she played, who also did the same injury as her, talked about the fact that it takes a little while for the strength to come back on her knee. Now, Libby Birch is right-footed, did her left knee. Bonnie Toogood, right-footed, did her right knee, which means she's not really been taking many set shots for goal in areas where she'd otherwise slot them. I saw a little bit more against the Western Bulldogs, might see a little bit more against North Melbourne. I would, again, just say that like North Melbourne is probably one of the worst matchups for her because she probably has to play on Jazz Ferguson running with her, and Jazz Ferguson's an exceptional one-on-one defender. But also, she went up against one-on-one defenders last year and still scored 80s and 90s. If she's a hair in the right direction, like if you're sideways in Zali Friswell, who's only scoring 30s and 40s at the moment, and you can get Bonnie Toogood scoring 60, then might have a 70 and then finishes with a Carlton where she had 120 last year. Like, I'm not going to begrudge people doing it. I just think it's not as easy as, oh, wow, she's lost 700k. She's less than half price. Bring her in. There's quite a few factors that say that it could be a tough one.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Well, that is it for the forwards. Barring anyone else coming up with some speculative options, I'm more than happy to talk about them. I'm going to quickly throw to myself in Captain's Corner. It's nice to have normal weeks again, no more double game weeks to worry about. I've got Ebony Marinoff up against Collingwood at number one. I know, shock surprise. I had said when, I can't remember if I said it on this pod or elsewhere, that I actually think that Noffy was going to excel in the double game week games because she just thrives on just throwing herself at the ball, and there was probably going to be some slower play and some messier play. She did exceptionally. I'm not expecting 170 again. Let's just say 140 and you'll be sitting pretty.
Well, here's a question for you. Can she finish the year averaging over 150? Or better question, will they?
So Adelaide have Collingwood, North and Geelong. I think she'll love the game against North. That's going to be just so much in and under stoppage pressure. That's going to be the best game of the rest of the season. It's just if she takes her foot off the pedal against Geelong, and it's really going to come down to ladder placements. I think that she probably averages 145 from the year on out, so probably not 150.
To average 145 from here, she probably has to score a score under 130, which apparently she doesn't do anymore. So
Yeah.
No, that's out of week one. It's just impossible. I think that if you've got her, she's comfortably sitting with your captaincy. In terms of the other options, I think Jazz Garner this week, she's looked back in form. She's not spending basically any time forward, staying on the ground. I think she had over 90% time on ground, and that's really where she locks down some of her massive scores. Next up, I've got Mon Conti in a Melbourne matchup where I again expect her to have no stoppage attention put into her, and she can really get off the chain, probably put up 110 to 115 score. Ash Riddell, I think Essendon is a team that is going to try and put some attention into Jazz Garner, but they still allow some pretty decently high scores. Ash Riddell is probably going to go one-on-one up against Maddie Prespakis. Maddie Prespakis loves to try and break tackles. Ash Riddell loves to lay them, but also just loves to just keep moving the ball forward, gets lots of great high-speed hand-to-foot kicks out. I think she's on for a big score this week and break the 90s funk. And then at 5, I've got Mimstrom because Fremantle have West Coast. And West Coast, I don't know who's going to rock this week. It could be Jamie Harkin for all I know. They've literally not had the same rotation in each of the last 4 games. And I think Mimstrom is a freak. She has had 100% CBAs in each of the last 4 of the last 5 games. And trust me, I know, because the only one that she hasn't taken was taken by Ariana Hetherington. I've been watching that ruck rotation at Fremantle with just laser-focused vision. In terms of some other options, Anne Hatchard was someone that we didn't talk about in the top 5 or barely missing, but also didn't mention as that far back. I think she could have a great game against Collingwood, probably kick a few goals. Real speculative one here, Keely Sherrard going up against the Western Bulldogs has been in some ripping form since basically Abby Mackay went down. So good, in fact, that she's now actually getting attention from teams. Still put up 100 with Mackay back in the side against Fremantle. I think she could go absolutely insane against the Dogs.
Let's be honest, if you're looking at these options, you're really going speculative.
I actually don't hate the idea of bringing Keely Sherrard.
Oh, no. I mean,
As your captain.
as a captain.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm more just trying to predict players that are going to have big scores this week. Other ones, Lucy Wales up against the Davis O'Dowd combo. Ellie Anderson against Geelong. Sophia Hurley up against Gold Coast, and then Ella Roberts up against Freo. I think Ella Roberts was on track for another 100 and Basquillian score in the first quarter against Hawthorn, then really slowed down. That's Captain's Corner. Basically, it's Ebony Marinoff and then one of Jazz Garner, Moncon or Riddell as your VC. Moving across to trade plans, Mel, I'll throw to you first. What is your number one trade priority for the week?
Oh, that's a good question. I've got a few different priorities because I'm in that position. I think a lot of coaches will be able to relate where everything's fine, but nothing is great. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of players where it's like, I mean, I don't think you can preach, Liam, but unless that was Will that said that.
I ran with Ariana Hetherington on field last week. Like, trust me, I am eking together
that was a great
team.
move.
Well, so it's how to turn some of this good into great. And so that's probably going to look like one trade for downgrading to get some cash, one trade for upgrading, and then probably a second downgrade or a sideways at best. So it's about where do I want to go great. I do have some extra cash in my second ruck, which is nice. I'll definitely be downgrading there. But it's, do I upgrade G Prasparkas, who I think so. I only really kept her because she was in for my double game week and then didn't really have the opportunity to trade her out. So it's just deciding where I want to invest.
Yep, that's a very fair call. I think G-Prez is someone, you've said you're going to trade her out. Probably could have talked about her in the midfields. Definitely a trade priority this week.
She wasn't that highly owned, so that's why I didn't really mention her there. But I think it speaks for herself.
I guess that's probably just because she was. I think she was like a top 2 or 3 player for that week. But that's because we had so few options, and like it's only if you needed a midfield were you looking there. And do you have a point of weakness? Is there someone speculative? Is there some desire for another Adelaide 300k Irish midfielder?
Oh yeah, not sure I'll be making that mistake again. I think it's the breaking the team stage. I don't know who exactly it would be for, but the desire to just go, oh, well, I'm not allowed to swear, but throw it all away. Effort. Exactly. And go, I want one particular big name. I want a Ghana. I want, who would have been the defenders? What's her name? Newman. I want Newman. I want Ghana. I want Strom. I'm going to ruin my team in other ways just to be able to get them. I think we're entering effort territory in the final weeks, and I've got to resist and just be a little bit more sensible. Fair
enough. Will, what's your number one trade priority?
Well, I'm going to say effort and ruin my entire team.
No.
Surprisingly, I'm actually not. My number one trade priority is fixing my forward line. I still have Panger on field, but I'm going to run with that for another week. So taking Friswell out and up is my main priority. I'm also going to move on Maeve Chaplin. Disappointed with that trade, but is what it is. Was originally looking at doing midfield trades. I think that I've got more pressing issues. I do have Georgie Prasparkas, who will probably be my priority next week. But at the moment, I'm looking at bringing in Alice O'Loughlin because I think she's got a great finish to end the year, hoping to get the 300-point score against Gold Coast. And I decided to do something a little bit funky, and I brought in friend of the pod, Georgia Stathis, in the back line on the back of that 94 because she's cheap and pretty much a straight sideways swap from Chaplin. Hopefully that, obviously it was a very interesting game, that Bulldogs won, but if that continues, Georgia Stathis stocks could be up. So
you basically read out my trades. I am looking at doing very similar things.
Good.
Got Frizz, got Chaplin. I've looked at Georgia Stathis.
Very good.
I've looked at Island Gilroy as a 780k option. Looking at an Onu McDonough trade-in potentially in the forward line. Could get up to Greta Bodie. Could kind of have a stab at Danielle Ponta for a good run. I'm really not settled, but I think my biggest two priorities are probably Frizz and Chaplin. I could also consider a ruck upgrade, but I am not settled on that either. Point of weakness, I think I wrote this down earlier. It was like, do I keep Pounger at F5? Do I try and run with Hetherington? I think they've both got cash to make. I think I'm just going to stick with Pounger because I feel like she's probably a 50 to 60. And I just don't know if Hetherington's going to be able to do it that much.
Yep. And my point of weakness is every trade decision I made for the first 4 weeks But realistically, at the moment, it's basically I've still got some less than ideal players in my lower ranks in pretty much every line. I've got Verrier as my D5, who's been doing not too bad, but still
Not enough.
Not enough. Prosparkus and Paunger, and I still have... And this is what I was saying about Eilish O'Dowd, which is I'd love to trade Eilish O'Dowd out, but I have much bigger concerns.
I hear what you're saying now.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of much bigger concerns...
Also, just quickly, actually, just in my first iterations of trade, the player that I brought in to get the money to make my current trades was, in fact, Boyle Carr, without knowing about the history of Mel's trades. So.
Can I suggest you don't?
That is a beautiful drive-by shooting to end the show on. Thank you all so much for joining this bumper episode. I hope you appreciate why it might have been a little bit longer. There's quite a few things that we need to catch up on from the insanity of these double game weeks. And now we've got a fair bit more time to listen and process our thoughts before trades on Thursday. As always, you can find the article that Jono and I will write. It will likely come out at some point on Tuesday afternoon. Now, that could be before or after you hear this. That's not entirely certain. But whenever this podcast comes out, make sure you give it a read. We get some extra thoughts in there that you don't otherwise always hear on the podcast. As always, you can find the podcast and everything podcast related at the handle FreeKickWPod. You can find me on Twitter at Liam AFLW Fantasy.
I'm on Twitter as FreeKickMel.
And I am at FreeKickWill.
Hope you've enjoyed it this evening, or hope you've enjoyed listening to us today. And praise be to the end of the double game weeks. You'll hear from us next week. Cheers.
Catch everyone.
Bye.